It sounds like we've got somebody listening today. How lovely is that?
Good to see you, Maria. And how are things going for you this week?
Very good, thank you. As you can see, I am wearing another of the tops that have been pre-approved by Kay, who was our guest. Was it last week, Kay?
Yes,
it seems
Kay,
so long ago.
great guest.
Yeah, and I got lots of these wonderful envelopes from her with photos of outfits. I went out of focus then, didn't I? I shouldn't have done that. Of my outfits, and she'd put them all together so I can stick them in my wardrobe. I've got envelopes for Zoom outfits, casual outfits, smart outfits. What else have I got? Anyway, it's not fault. I'm never going to look at my wardrobe and think I haven't got a thing to wear. I just went to my Zoom photos, my Zoom section, and here I am.
Well, you're looking fantastic today, and we are a little bit color coordinated, as everyone can see here. So should we tell everyone what we have this week coming up in Speaking Business TV?
Absolutely, go for it.
So today we have a special guest, and we're going to be talking about a number of things. One is LinkedIn strategies to get new speaking clients, but we're also going to talk about imposter syndrome. Really important topic to talk about. So our guest this week is a LinkedIn learning instructor, as well as the author of 2 books and an award-winning international speaker on communication, inclusive leadership, and empathy at work. She's passionate about helping organizations create an atmosphere of belonging for their people and for those individuals in turn to be given the skills and opportunity to communicate with power and clarity. Please welcome to the show, Shola Kaye.
Hello. Hi, James. Hi, Maria. Great to be here.
Hello. How lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. So lots of exciting stuff to talk about today. But before we start, I think most of our listeners will be curious, and viewers will be curious to know, what do you actually talk about, Shola? And also, during this pandemic, I'm going to use a dreadful word beginning with P. Did you have to make any pivots?
Well, yes, I certainly did have to make a pivot, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But what I talk about right now, the topic that's booked the most for me is empathy in the workplace. And obviously, with all that's been going on over the last 18 months or so, there is a new level of understanding and listening that's required in the workplace. And so I go along, give people some skills, awareness of how important empathy is, listening, inclusive leadership, meetings where everybody's voice gets heard, especially now when there's so much dissent in the workplace, with some wanting to get back to work in the office, some wanting to stay at home. So that's a big topic. And things like feedback, just anything to do with culture, bringing people in, getting people more involved, making sure that everyone is being able to make a contribution. So that's the main topic at the moment. And in terms of pivot, yes, because initially I was mainly speaking on communication. And then after the tragic death of George Floyd, one of my clients in the States who had hired me to do some work for them in London on communication, then passed me on to one of her colleagues in San Francisco and said, Shola, can you do some work with them around DEI? And I actually said, well, I can share some things, but I mainly speak on communication. I even gave them the number of somebody. I said, look, here's an email address, use this person. And they said, no, we really want you to do it. We had a great experience with you. We'd love you to be the one. So I ended up starting working with this company in San Francisco, which of course was enabled by the pandemic, because otherwise they would have got someone local. And then from there, it just blossomed, I guess. And I just did more and more work, sort of fusing communication with DEI, and then adding more around leadership to that also.
Okay, just in case there's somebody out there who doesn't know what DEI is, could you just expand that for us?
Thank you. The voice of reason there, Maria. No acronyms on this show. So DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what those mean.
Thank you for that. And before I hand over to James, because I know he's got a question for you, I wanted just to point out something you said, which I thought was so valuable, a lovely tip there, because we're talking about strategies to find clients. But actually, when you have a good client, as you did in the US, who really trusts you and you've built a great relationship, they're going to come back to you and say, can you help us with this as well? Even if it's not something that you might necessarily do. And you have to be very you were very good to say, well, actually, this isn't my area. And that was very noble to say that, because it's tempting, especially in a pandemic, to take whatever you can get. So that was really good you did that. But the fact that they were prepared to say, well, we understand, I think that's great. That it's so important not to just look for new clients, but to really work with your existing relationships. So thank you for sharing that. I digressed a little bit there, I think, James. So over to you.
No, I was interested. I mean, you mentioned that client, you previously worked for them in the UK, then you can able to start working with them in the US office as well, the San Francisco office. Can you tell us about, who is your kind of typical client? Is there such a thing that you have as a typical client in terms of industries or kind of sizes of client? Just because obviously this is going out just now. There might be someone from one of those companies watching just now and thinking, actually, we need Shola to come in and help us with this.
It varies. At the time, sort of about a year and a half ago, I was mainly looking at working with tech companies who had perhaps up to about 8,000 employees distributed over various countries. And the first company they fell into that bracket, but then the second company was very local to California, and that sort of opened me up a bit. And so now the sort of clients that I'm working with are anything from small companies with perhaps 30 people all the way up to companies with sort of 80,000 people. And I try and be a little bit flexible with the offering and with the pricing so that I can work with a range. But I personally like the different challenges of working with different size organizations and also different industries to some extent, although mainly there is sort of a tech, healthcare sort of theme, maybe some media companies as well are clients. But I just enjoy that sort of mixing it up a little bit and being quite broad in that sense.
Often in the media, when we see like DEI being kind of spoken about, it's almost, look at what the CEO did. Look at the absolute clangor the CEO. There's lots of stories we see all the time in the newspapers of a CEO just not having, well, actually also empathy. You mentioned empathy, not really having empathy for the other members of their team as well. The topics you speak on, how do you get the client to move from thinking of this as almost a tick box exercise that they have to do, to actually use that word culture, to actually make it a culture within the organization, something that's part of the organization, how it lives and breathes?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I've had clients that come in and said, oh, we've got this training on bias. And then you'll see this little half an hour thing with, they'll watch these little vignettes and then just do a little multiple choice at the end to say, yes, I've done the training and now I'm done. So it's definitely about moving people beyond that and getting them to be aware that the impact will be so much greater if you've got somebody there who's telling personal stories, who is actually soliciting the audience for feedback and for stories of their own about what's working for them in that culture and what's not working for them. So it becomes much more of a discussion than just these little CBT computer-based training things that people do in 10 minutes. So that's happening on the one hand, so this interactivity, storytelling, and then also making sure that these organizations do get their senior management teams involved. So sometimes it's great because they'll say, can you come in and do 2 sessions, one for our senior leadership team and then one for the entire company? And then other times you'll go in and it's more at the sort of the team level, and they'll say, oh, are our leadership doing this training? They really need it. They need it. So then it's a case of going back to the client and saying, well, do you realize that there's a pressing need for your senior leadership to do this? So I definitely agree that there are many companies that are just trying to, for a very sort of performative reasons, say, yes, we've done the training, we're good to go. But then I think there are many others who, despite the difficulty and all the sort of gnarliness of the subject, are really trying to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion into the culture. And it's not a quick fix by any means, but they really are taking those steps and committing to sort of looking at hiring, development of staff, and so on, their work in the community. And they realize that it will take time, and it will take money, and it will take energy, and it will irritate some staff, but they are actually committed to making things really happen.
So on that, I mean, Maria, when you were primarily focused on the bureau side of your business, you were kind of working with clients all the time. When they came to you asking about these kind of topics and finding a speaker like Shola, for example, to come in, how were you having? What was that conversation like? I'm always interested. Like, I have a conversation as a speaker, Shola and I have a conversation as a speaker to the client, but what's the conversation like with the bureau and the client around that topic?
I don't think it would be any different, to be honest, because clients that come to bureaus are quite open about what they want to achieve, and possibly talk to us even more openly because we're a little bit detached in a way. So as long as you've got a good trusting relationship with them, they'll tell you, you know, what's going on. What I like about what Shola's talking about, and it's moved on, I like the fact that we're talking about equity as opposed to equality, and there is a big difference with regards to equity and equality.
Okay, Maria, I'm going to have your Shola explain the differences for this. For me,
Shola,
no, I'm going to put my hand up. Tell me the difference between equity and equality.
Okay, so equality is making sure that everybody has the same stuff. But if you're starting a race and there are some people who are 10 minutes behind, and then there are some people that are at the starting line, some people start the race, you know, in the middle of the field, then it's not fair for everybody. So some people will need different things than others. So if you've got a workplace where there are lots of parents who need perhaps flexible working, then it's about giving those people flexible working. If you have a workplace where there are people who perhaps have a disability, like they're hard of hearing, it's about giving them the tools so that they can hear properly and be able to participate in what's going on. So equity is really about meeting people where they are and giving them what they need to get things done, as opposed to saying, well, everybody now should have flexible working, because not everybody needs it, basically.
Yeah, thank you for helping clarify that for me as well. So I'm sure if there's anyone else watching, maybe leave in the comments as well. That's great. One of the reasons I love having guests like yourself on, Shola, is because I just feel like I learn so much every time I have a guest on. It's like I would watch this show even if I wasn't involved in doing this show. So thank you, Shola, for that.
That's good. And remember that when you're not available or if you're sick, that you're going to watch it, right? Good. What helped me understand equity really well was a beautiful cartoon, and I don't know who the cartoonist was, but it was three men actually, a man, a middle child, and a small child, wanting to watch football, and they had to watch it over the fence, and football being topical at the moment, obviously. And the tall man could just look over the fence, no problem. The middle child could just about reach it, and the tiny one couldn't. And they were given boxes all the same height. And of course, the tall man's really super tall now. The middle child could now see, but the little one still couldn't. So it was like they needed different heights in order to all be able to be at the same level to watch the football. So there you go, a football story. Can I come back? I want to come back. You made the point, James made the point about CEOs needing to be empathetic. I think you also need to work with some politicians, please, Shola, because I think government and politicians need to be empathetic. But let's move on to a bit more about you personally, because I was surprised to hear, because you come across to me as very grounded, very confident, very knowledgeable. But you told us before the show that you've actually had to deal with imposter syndrome and grow your speaking and do your marketing and put yourself out there feeling like an imposter. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people, and I won't say women in particular, but a lot of times women do say that they have imposter syndrome, more so than I hear from men, especially when I was doing a lot of work on communication. And I think, especially as a speaker, you come in and you may watch some speaker demo videos, especially some of the American speakers, and it's like Bruce Springsteen's like about to come and play a massive stadium, and there's slow-mo and roaring crowds, and you think, well, here I am, I've barely got a demo video. I'm just about to scratch together a keynote speech. How on earth can I even sort of see myself in that arena? And so I think it can be hard for, and especially with something like speaking where there's no defined pathway. Like if you wanted to be a top doctor, you've got to go to medical school, Whereas with something like speaking, there are so many different routes into it. And so I certainly, at the beginning, I knew I wanted to speak, but I couldn't see myself, I couldn't really visualize the pathway. And so what I had to do is very early on, especially when you don't have much, so you've got this sort of really shaky looking demo video, you've got 10 speeches because you're still saying, oh, I can talk on anything, right? And then you're thinking, well, how on earth do I approach an organization? They will never hire me. So what I started out by doing was I found somebody who was very affordable, who offered to do a little bit of PR for me. And she literally, I think I'd spent like £60 a week on her or something. It wasn't a lot of money. But for that, she was the one that was going out and taking all the knocks and the blows and the rejections. And she'd say, oh, I'll try all these places for you. And then she'd never tell me. She wouldn't say, oh, you got rejected, but there was just there wasn't a next step. So clearly I did, right? But she did enough that when I'd written my first book, she approached places like Marie Claire, Harper's Bazaar, somebody who wrote for Forbes. And I would never have even dared to go to Marie Claire and say, oh, can Shola appear in your event? But she did. And so I say to people, if you don't, just because you're an introvert, you're a quiet person, you don't feel like you've got enough, don't let that stop you. Find a way, if it's about delegation, doing skill swaps, whatever it might be, find a way to get yourself out there. You don't have to be the one that takes the rejection personally. Someone can do it on your behalf. And so that kind of enabled me to kind of get a foot in the door and get myself on the ladder. And then the more I've been able to achieve, of course, you build more confidence over time. But I say to everyone, don't let it stop you that you don't have a lot at the beginning, because most people don't start with much. That's just the name of the game, really.
And the more you do, the more confident you get, of course, because you get great feedback and you get clients like the client you had saying, come back and do this for us, even though we know it's not your topic. That's it. Sort of, it's momentum, isn't it? You need to get that momentum. I love that. Thank you. James.
Yeah, on that, the imposter syndrome, it's an interesting one. As you know, my background was working with a lot of music artists before get into the world of professional speaking. And I was always really amazed at meeting really quite well-known performers and artists, meeting them in person before they went on stage, having a conversation with them, and seeing like just how nervous and how they were asking, do you think this looks okay? Do you think this is just all the things? And it actually, I found it quite a freeing experience to spend time with other, and I'm talking about creatives here more broadly, because it felt, we're all in this together. You on stage, sometimes you project a certain thing, at the side of the stage, maybe there's something else going. And there was someone, I think it was a performer or a speaker, I think it was possibly a speaker that told me this early on, is he said, don't try to compare your back shop to their front shop. And I remember hearing that at the time, and you mentioned like promotional videos where everything looks amazing. I remember seeing like Mel Robbins' promotional video, and I go, oh, I'm just going to give up now. There's no point in doing this anymore. She's so amazing. But someone said to me, don't compare your back shop to someone else's front shop. And that, for me, I don't know, but that just kind of gave me a little bit of confidence, because it can be challenging, because you're putting yourself out there, aren't you, Shirley? When you're kind of going, you're putting those videos, you're going up on that stage. That's you. There's kind of nowhere to hide there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. And this idea of not necessarily stay in your own lane, because I think you can go to different lanes if that's where you want to go, but just recognizing that you're on your journey. And so as long as you look behind and you say, well, I'm a bit further than I was yesterday, that's all you can do. And I think for me to compare myself to Mel Robbins or to you, James, or to anyone, we're on our own journeys, and our audiences will each take something different from what we have to offer. And so, James, you will give something to your audience that perhaps my audience at that where they are may not need at that time, or maybe my message or my style is suited to them because of where and who they are. And I think as long as you can come away from your talks knowing that you genuinely want the best for your audience, and you did whatever you needed to do to kind of create that awareness and help them move forward, then whether you're speaking to 10 people at a tiny association event where you're not getting paid, or whether you're speaking to 10,000, you're still on the journey and you're still doing good stuff.
Now, you mentioned that one marketing strategy, which is around things like PR, and that almost had like two functions for you. One was it had the function of kind of getting you known and getting you in the market, but also it was a little bit of a protective shield between you just as things were just starting. What other marketing strategies have you been finding most useful, especially because you're also now expanding? You're based in the UK, but you have clients in America and all over the world. What's working for you at the moment when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, for me, I've tried a lot of different things. Some in some depth and some just in a very superficial way. And LinkedIn really helped me, especially during the pandemic, because I've been trying to, years ago, I lived in the States and I wanted to do some more work with American clients for a number of reasons. But obviously there's the problem with, if you're wanting to travel over there, there's the expense of an airfare, there's of course the visa issue, there's also the fact they don't know you because you're from a different country. So what I found was, unfortunately, the pandemic brought a lot of unfortunate things with it, but what it has forced many of us to do is to kind of look beyond where we were and seek out new ideas, new business, and so on. So I thought, well, okay, if everything's virtual, this is a wonderful time for me to expand to new markets, because it doesn't, obviously all the airfare and the visa thing disappears. So I decided to use LinkedIn a lot more strategically, probably this time last year, I guess. And there are a few different strategies which I'm happy to share. But the first one was just being very single-minded about connecting with potential or people that had potential to be clients on a regular basis, and then having a strategy for the sort of emails that I would send them or the messages I would send them. So we all know, we've all seen the people that sort of connect and pitch, right? So they connect with you, and then the next second you're getting this sort of lengthy message telling you about their services. Right?
Yes.
And so to be honest, I think I tried it a couple of times and realized it's icky, right?
Yeah.
So what I was doing was made sure that I had a strap line that made it very clear what I did. So I think for me, I just literally put empathy at work, communication, and inclusive leadership. That was my strap line. So every single time I messaged somebody, even if it was just a connection message, that strap line would be at the bottom. And that's doing the selling for you, because you don't need to say, well, I've got 10 speeches and I've got, you don't need to do any of that. As long as the line's there, if there's any curiosity that's piqued, that person will of course look at your profile. So having a really well filled out profile with your lead magnets, speech titles, all those sorts of things actually in the LinkedIn profile, so no one needs to go beyond there. Plus every message having this little strapline at the end, I found that sometimes there'd be people who would immediately see the strapline and say, oh, I'm looking for that right now. Can we have a meeting? There'd be others who weren't looking, but I'd have a series of messages. So I'd have the initial connection, then I'd have a thank you for connecting, again with the strapline. Then a few days after that, I would send them an article. And it typically wasn't an article written by me, because again, that sounds a bit too promotional. So I'd send them something that was, at that time, it was about the pandemic, empathy, something to do with working from home, along those lines. It was actually genuinely useful and written by somebody else. And I'd send that again with the strap line. And some people would say thank you. Some people, would just carry on. And then I'd send another message, probably a week or so later, then saying, hey, a lot of us are working from home right now. Hope you don't mind, I've contacted you. It'd be great to, if you ever fancy a chat, let me know. If not, I've got some PDFs that might be interesting. So I just kind of made it very casual. And again, with the strap line. And some people, again, would say, yeah, let's have a call. And others would ignore you. But then what would happen is the combination of the personal reach out, plus on top of that, you're regularly posting on LinkedIn, whether it's, just an update or some curated articles, whatever it might be, just keeps you top of mind. So I had literally somebody contacted me about a speaking gig yesterday who I'd been in touch with a year ago. And sometimes people, they'll write down, they'll keep a file of everyone that's approached them. And then when they're ready, they'll get in touch. So sometimes it's a bit dispiriting when you don't get a lot of immediate responses to these messages. Yeah. But just keep in mind that there are many people who are waiting for their moment.
It's like you might be able to hear just now in the background in the field, there's a tractor just going outside of where I'm filming today, and they're planting. They're planting seeds just now. They're this time of year that they're doing a lot of planting, and it's going to be like 6 months before they start seeing anything. But they don't get. I've never seen a particularly stressed farmer, because they just know that they just keep focused on the planting, and you're kind of planting those seeds with your client. There are two things I just want to unpack from you. First of all, how do you find the right people to connect with on LinkedIn? And secondly, and this is maybe a more tactical question, is Are you doing all of this manually? How do you know to follow up a week's time afterwards? Or are you using some app or some tool to do that?
Yeah, so good questions. So the first one is finding people. And again, I ended up outsourcing some of this work to a VA. And also I used an agency for some of the kind of LinkedIn lead sourcing as well. And the good thing there was the fact that they were approaching people that, again, I wouldn't have dared to, so heads of HR, CEOs for big companies, I'd have thought, oh, there's no way they'll be interested in me. And then some of them were coming back and saying, oh, yeah, this looks good. Let's have a chat. So although a lot of people say the personal approach is important, I think sometimes if you're the sort of person who would not go step up for the big opportunities, somebody who's a bit more impartial can be helpful in those situations. So in terms of actually the execution of all this, I tried different things. So initially I tried, and people will say, oh, not supposed to use agencies on LinkedIn because it's all supposed to be done directly. But I did get some help with initially with doing some of the campaigns, and then I would follow up either personally or with a VA helping me out. And then also I tried another strategy where I used a VA to do some of this, and then I did some of the personal contacts. So it was, the communication was genuine, but she would help me with some of the targeting and sort of reaching out initially, and then I would follow up. Because that's the thing with lead gen, it's kind of broad, right? And it can generate a lot of noise sometimes with people that aren't the right ones for you and so on. But I think it's like digging for gold, right? Where there's quite a bit of mud, but then there's the odd nugget here and there.
Yeah, we're definitely getting into the agricultural metaphors today as well. But I know, because you and I have spoken before, you're a Speakers U member, and I know some of the clients that you work with, and you have clients that most speakers would die to have on their roster to be able to work with. So something is working for you. So congratulations to you for that, because I know it's a lot of work, but you're definitely starting to see the results from it. Maria, I know you're a massive LinkedIn
I love
fan.
LinkedIn.
You're a big LinkedIn.
Yeah. I love LinkedIn. And I think you can actually target quite well on LinkedIn. You can decide this is the industry I want to work in, or these are the type of people, the job roles, this is the area. You can even do it by location, by area. So I love all that. I have a question for you, because I'm curious to know, your VA that you had helping you, did your VA use your profile and approach as you, or approach as themselves?
Yeah, great question. We tried both, and then because there was an awkwardness as well, because sometimes with a VA, they're used to using language which is, oh, I hope you don't mind, as opposed to, yeah, we're equals here. Yeah. So I had to pick her up a few times on, hey, look, I'm equal with this person, and we're contacting people in the States. So we need to use language that's more casual than, oh, excuse me, would you mind if I, so yeah, I mean, there were teething problems around that. And we tried both. Sometimes we said, oh, this is Angela, the VA of Shola, and sometimes we did it as me. But I think she felt more comfortable doing it as herself.
Of course.
And also when an error is made, it's like, you're like, oh no. So it's easier if there's a mistake that they own up to than me.
Absolutely. That's interesting. And actually, certainly if you've got somebody working for you doing anything on social media, you've got to almost give them directions into your tone of voice, your language. I mean, for example, I don't like terms like tricks or secrets or hacks. I don't like any of those. So I don't want anybody to use that in my social media. And I want people to use me and you correctly, because I want my grammar to be correct. So I'm a bit pedantic if somebody else. So I tend to be a bit of a control freak when it comes to it. But I think part of it, though, Shola, isn't it, when you get into a rhythm, and I know James creates a lot of content. I'm always admiring of how much content he creates. I think once you get to a rhythm and you can batch it and do things you can create the content to support, because as you said, you've got to be top of mind. Even if you're messaging and that person's not ready for a year, they've got to remember you. They may not remember your name, but if they see you and they see videos and they see your posts, they'll come back. When I started in the world of speaker bureaus, I worked at CSA, Celebrity Speakers, and I was trained by Alex Krywald, the founder, who for me was a phenomenal trainer and mentor. I mean, one of the best in the business. And he always said to us, it's like it's a numbers game. And it's a pipeline, and you keep feeding the pipeline until it's so full that everything then comes out the other end. And as long as you keep feeding it, so however busy you get when you're successful, you still have to keep feeding that pipeline, or you're going to have, you're not going to have any more seeds and any more harvest, are you? You've got to keep doing it and keep repeating it.
Yeah.
Super.
Now, we'll be talking a lot about empathy here as well, empathy at work, and and that's your kind of topic that you're kind of known for. So you've kindly, we've got a guide here that you've put together called Preparing for Empathy. We're going to have a link. If people go to speakingbusiness.tv and just enter it into the resources, we'll find a link there. Shola, tell us a little bit about that PDF guide, please.
Yes. Well, a lot of people, when I'm doing keynotes, people seem to think that empathy is a trait. So you're either born with it or you're not. And that can be a little bit of a get out of jail. Like, well, I'm not very empathetic. Don't involve me in this sort of thing. And empathy is actually a skill. And of course, some people are better at it than others, but it's something that we can all work on. So the idea of this PDF guide is giving people some simple steps that they can put in play so that they can actually start to flex that empathy muscle and then be better listeners, better colleagues, better friends and family as well. And that's why I put it together as almost like a precursor to a lot of the diversity, equity and inclusion work that is going on in so many organizations right now.
Great. Well, we have that link. Just go to speakingbusiness.tv into the resources there, and we're going to have the link to Shola's LinkedIn profile, because you're going to want to see Shola's LinkedIn profile now after we've spoken about it. We're going to have a link to the PDF. And also, you also have a book which is specifically about public speaking. Can you tell us about that as well?
Yes, yeah. So years ago, just a sort of a little bit about my background. So I basically started out working in corporates, and again, we talked about sort of quietness and being a bit timid. I didn't really speak up enough. So I had a couple of, and I talk about this in my keynotes, it's no secret, but there's one job I had where I got put on probation because they said I didn't speak up enough. Another job I got after 6 months, they said, oh, we're letting you go, you don't speak up enough. So I thought, well, blow all this corporate stuff. I'm just going to do the thing that I dreamt of as a kid, which is be a professional singer. So in my 30s, I thought, okay, I can make this happen. So I took singing lessons, etc. And for about 10 years, worked as a professional singer. And so coming back into communication and speaking, I thought, well, what's the angle that I can put on speaking? And it's drawing analogies between standing on stage as a singer and as an entertainer, writing songs versus writing speeches and speaking for a living. So the book, How to Be a Diva at Public Speaking, comes from that experience, but it's very much step by step how to be a better communicator, whether it's just small meetings and things, or whether it's on bigger stages.
And I would imagine you got very good at improvising with audiences as part of 10 years of singing in front of audiences. You see all kinds of things that happen in that context. So it's something that's been useful for you as a public speaker.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'd said to you on another, when we were talking before, James, that sometimes I'd do big gigs with bands, and other times it would just be me, my little backing track and my PA. And it would be people dancing around with full glasses of Guinness, about to spill their drinks on my expensive PA. You'd see all sorts of things happening, and you've got to be ready to respond to all of it. So it has certainly helped moving into the speaking world with things that might go wrong every now and again.
Well, fantastic. But we'll definitely go check out that book.
I don't know about you, James, but I did a double take when Shola said, when I got into my 30s, I decided to start singing. I thought, you don't even look like you are 30. So whatever you're doing, absolutely. I'm going to double take that. I'm going to go and check now and see what else you've done. I think, wow. Fantastic. You've also, so we like to share a tip or a tool on the show for anybody listening in. In fact, I think some people just tune in just to hear what the tip or tool is every week. You're going to generously share one with us as well.
Yes, you know what? I've just forgotten what mine is. So why don't you two go first, and I'll come back in.
If you like, I can remind you if you like. It was about finding somebody else to go for the opportunities, which you've shared twice.
There we go. Yes. So as I said, absolutely. And I'll share it a third time because I really do feel, and every time I mention it, there are people that come up and say, oh, thank you so much. I didn't realize that I didn't have to do this myself. So if you're out there and you've got a dream to be a speaker and you're just a bit afraid of getting going, delegate, Fiverr, Upwork, skill swaps. Just find somebody who can do that stuff for you and then grow into your shoes later on.
Fantastic. Really good advice. I've got a tool that I'd like to share too. And I don't know about you guys, but I have tried so many different ways of arranging my to-dos, my to-do lists. I'm not going to name all the ones that I've rejected because I think it would be a bit unfair, but I finally found one based on, I don't know if you've read this book, Dave Allen's Getting Things Done, which is a great book about being organized and being productive. And there's an app called Things. It's called Things 3 because it's the third version, Things to Do. It's not free. You have to pay for it. You have to buy it for your Mac. It's iOS. So apologies to anybody who's PC out there, but it's iOS. You have to buy it for your Mac. You have to buy it for your iPhone. And it's changed my life. And you're going to be saying, but why? How can that do that? I enjoy using it, which I've never enjoyed with any other app at all. I can send my emails to my to-dos and they appear and they can become an action that I need to take. I can tag things, so I can pull things out all the same. So if I want to tag something, or this is a 5-minute thing to do, I've got 5 minutes. Okay, what are my 5-minute activities? I can pull them all up and do those. What else can I do? I had to write it down because it does so many things. I can have areas. I can have an area for my finances or an area for, home stuff or area. So I can have different areas. I can have projects. I can have reminders. I can repeat things. It syncs with my calendar. So I can see that it links with my calendar. I can see my upcoming events with my calendar and my upcoming tasks. I love it. I can do checklists. It's just brilliant, brilliant. So although I've had to pay for it, I would pay for it over again. And it's one that I've stuck with. And I'm getting much more organized. Even my team are shocked. I don't forget stuff anymore.
And Maria, just remind us the name of the app again. We'll make sure we'll put it in speakingbusiness.tv. We'll have a link to it as well. But what's the name of the app?
The app is called Things 3 because I think it's the third version of it. Or you might have to put in Things to Do. Or but Things 3 on the App Store. And I'm not on commission. So genuinely, it's brilliant. Go for it.
Maria, you are such a geek. You are the techie. Like, for someone that describes himself as not particularly techie, you are always telling me about the latest apps and tools. So great. So I'm going to go and check that out myself, I think, just now. So Shola, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're going to have links to your LinkedIn. People want to go check out that as well. It's great seeing your speaking career go from strength to strength. It's just wonderful to see it really kind of blossoming. So thank you so much for taking time to come on the Speaking Business TV today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks to the both of you.
Lovely, lovely to see you. Keep on going. Thank you so much. Goodbye to everybody watching. Thank you
Bye.
for participating. Take care.
Take care, everyone.